I call the meeting to order. Dave Moore just texted me. He's on his way. It's Thursday, September 14th. Call the Economic Development Commission meeting to order. First thing on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from August 10th, 2017. Are there any changes or comments that need to be made? No? Do I have a motion?
So moved to adopt.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Update from Mr. Cook.
And just to start with the theme we were just discussing before the start of the meeting, I was at I'm chair of KERMA's Operations and Underwriting Committee. So yesterday we had a meeting, and one of CCM's lobbyists was there, and in fact there is discussion about the potential for a deal today. There's very little in the way of detail about what that deal includes. As I understood it yesterday, it does include some payment of the teacher retirement obligation by towns. Not a large one, but it sounds like if this thing is passed, that horse is out of the barn, which is very problematic. All this assumes that right now the Democrats are able to hold rank, and I'm not sure that they've demonstrated the ability to do that. So from my perspective, throughout this process, the legislature has demonstrated that it is not constitutionally able to pass a budget. I don't think they know how in a world where they actually need to cooperate with one another. At least that hasn't been demonstrated yet. That said, there is a lot of pressure on them to get a deal done before October 1st, because things start to go terribly wrong for a lot of towns after October 1st if they don't get some money. So that's where we are. The only other piece that's to share on that is that one of the great concerns is the lack of detail. There's very little in writing. As with prior budgets with this legislature, what you'll end up with is concepts approved and then an implementer bill that's 1,000 pages long that tries to turn that into meaningful law. And in a lot of areas that's just not worked. A good example is the alleged cap on town spending, which they can't even enforce because no one really is quite sure how it works. So this is a very very discouraging spot to be in. The town of Simsbury's initial analysis, which Sean Kimball has provided, suggests that the contingency steps that they took when they passed the budget should be adequate to absorb whatever the final outcome is, assuming that it has been narrowed down. As you all probably know, the governor did present another budget himself. And when we looked at that, we figured out it's not good news by a long shot, but it is within the contemplated bad news that the town prepared for when it passed the budget. So that's probably the biggest economic development issue we face is this. In the absence of some kind of long-term certainty about how the state's going to deal with their financial issues, it's going to be very hard to attract, let alone retain, businesses in the state. The other piece of news is the Deepwater Wind process, which is the Connecticut Siting Council held a public hearing on Tuesday. I don't know, a number of you were there, I believe, and there were really three pieces to this. One was sort of a drive-through of the sites, which was at 1:30. The Siting Council started to started an evidentiary hearing at 3 o'clock, which went till 5, and then there was a public hearing after that. The Board of Selectmen took a position based on the feedback it received from all the boards and commissions. This turned out to be an enormously helpful exercise, and all of the responses received were thoughtful, were were balanced, were well-informed. For example, the Clean Energy Task Force, which you would expect to be 100% for moving forward with solar, said this is a good idea, provided it can be appropriately balanced with town aesthetics and the interests of abutters, provided it's the right scale. Similarly, the Conservation Commission, which could have been counted on to say, under no circumstances should the land be used for this, said some use along these lines would be appropriate, but there's a lot of information missing. And I think what that did was that led to a really almost as close to a consensus position. I'm not saying that such a thing has actually been achieved, but it was pretty close. Where the Board of Selectmen was able to take the position, and it took the position that this project as currently presented is not ready, is not and should not be approved in its current form. There were, at the hearing, a lot of questions about some of the key issues. One of them is that the current plan would take one of our historic properties on Hoskins Road and completely surround it with solar panels. It would, at one of the key entry points, if you will, of that area, it would end up with you'd end up with either lots of buffering, or it's just the wrong place. And there were questions from the Siting Council staff about whether that could be avoided in some form or other. So that's underway. The hearing will be continued on October 10th. There are some motions that have not been addressed yet, to my knowledge, unless something happened towards the very end of the process on Tuesday. I don't think it did.
It did not.
Okay. Including a motion that the whole process ought to be held to a very, very high standard of review, either under the state law recently passed or at the discretion of the Siting Council, which could choose to change this from a petition process to a certification process. We don't know whether or not that will happen. So that's underway. Now to some of the things that we have had some control over.
Well, can I just make a comment about
Absolutely.
Deepwater? So Lisa Hebner sent a letter out to all the chairs of the commissions, reserving a date in October, I believe it was, Tom?
Yeah, that's right.
For possible testimony by the commission chairs should the Siting Council request it.
Right.
So I will obviously recuse myself from that, and Dave could go as a dual role because he's the commissioner, the chair of ethics, on behalf of this commission, should we be asked to testify, because that she did ask for the commissioners to reserve that date in their calendar should the Siting Council want testimony.
What is the drop dead date for the Siting Council to make the decision? Do they have one?
Dave, they may, and if they do, it's I think they may. I just don't recall what it is, but
they have a certain number of days from the application.
Yeah, I think, and I want to say it's something like 90-something.
I think it's 90-some days,
yeah,
but
right.
It's a quick process.
It is a quick process
under statute.
Yeah.
So.
And again, the Siting Council staff informally informed us that they were very impressed by the level of attention and detail in the board and commission reports they received back.
And Deepwater has not answered all the interrogatories that were sent by the town, correct?
Well, they've taken exception to a lot of them. They've noted their objections and
but have not answered the questions.
Have not, in many cases, answered them. On a more positive note, yeah.
The process, once they make their decision, the only recourse the town would have would be to take it to court?
I believe that's right. That's a very high standard for overturning something like that. So I think it's this is our best shot to get things on the right track. Certainly a large part of what the town's process has been designed to achieve is a very complete record, so that if we do get to appellate issues, we're able to point to specific testimony and specific research that shows, for example, that we need a more detailed environmental analysis. The Silverman group, I believe, had their pre-construction meeting yesterday, which is good news. I believe they're planning to break ground in 2 to 4 weeks. So that's something that's positive and moving forward. The Cambridge Crossing, the Hoskins, the affordable housing piece.
Back on the Silverman Group, they're still waiting to get clearance from the DOT, I guess?
think they have one permit they're still waiting for from the Department of Transportation, but they're I haven't heard that they've received it. I can't imagine that they'd be breaking ground if there was any serious concern about it right now, but yeah, that's to the extent there's been any holdup, that's been it.
I just want to a couple of us were at the excuse me, ribbon cutting.
Right.
And I just want to welcome them to town. You know, the project, based on the project boards that they were presenting there, are very impressive, and they're going to be, you know, a very large addition to our tax rolls and our community, so we thank them for their investment in the community.
Yes, it was good to have representation there from the board, thank you.
To that point, the other two, there have been 2 sales. One is Dorset Crossing and the other is down by the grist mill of two of the apartment complexes, right? You're aware of that? By sales, I mean, the whole project has been sold out, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so things are moving, and moving in a positive direction. Another positive development was the sale of the Ensign House to the Scullys. That's been a tough project over time. The death of Jack Eno, I think, was a hardship for the investors, and they've, I think, arrived at a good point. The last piece from our office is that we've sent an email to board and commission chairs about the town manager recruitment process, and there are, in fact, focus groups that are going to be held on September 25th to get input from the community and from members of boards and commissions on the process, on what folks feel are the challenges faced by the town manager, what competencies they're looking for in a town manager. So that's in place. If you would like to attend that in a non-official capacity, feel free to call the First Select Women's Office, because there, I'm sure, are spaces. There are 3 different times to do it, and there's also on the 25th at 6 o'clock, the Board of Selectmen will also have a public hearing. So if people are unable to express opinions during the day, there will be that option in the evening.
Tom and I will be attending on behalf of this commission, because Dave will be attending on behalf of ethics, I believe, correct?
Correct.
Question,
Yes.
Tom, quite some time ago, this commission expressed a strongly held point of view that this commission wanted to become involved in the development of the job description for the town manager. Are these focus groups intended to get data on the job description that is desired by the community, or has the job description been written?
There is a draft, but it is only a draft, and it is based on a fairly boilerplate material, such as there's a lot of material, for example, in the charter itself that describes the position's responsibilities. But this, Tom, is the opportunity for that. And the process will be managed by Don Jutton, who is the recruiter that we hired, and he is, based on what's received at these meetings, a job description will be prepared and presented to the Board of Selectmen.
Well, does that draft, which we have not seen, is it a public document? Is it available?
In draft form right now, no, but it will be. Again, probably the best advice I can give you is to take a look at the specific responsibilities outlined in the charter, because it does not go much beyond that, and the draft is really more or less a codification of a compilation, if you will, of what's in the charter for the position.
Well, in terms of approaching these focus groups, I think it would be helpful if we could review that draft, or we could privately go to the revised charter. But I just want to put a stick in the ground about this, because there is this huge issue as to whether or not the job description of the town manager will include responsibility for economic development. Equally, we have not seen a job description for the first selectman under the new town charter, and that's a big issue too. To what extent will the first select, and we're going to vote on first selectman real soon.
Right.
And it seems to me that the community should not be asked to vote on the new first selectman, who that person's going to be, without knowing what that person is supposed to do.
Again, that's...
Can you correct me if I'm wrong? Because I may very well be. But when I presented the NEDC proposal, I believe it came up with the Board of Selectmen that the first selectman's position doesn't typically have a job description.
Right. There's never been a job description.
So, because when I brought that point up at the presentation, I was told that that probably wasn't going to be happening, because it's not customary for an elected position to have a job description.
That position was expressed by Lisa Hebner on Monday, and so, Tom, I don't think there's going to be any job description for the first selectwoman coming from the current Board of Selectmen. I do think that the inclusion of economic development responsibilities in a town manager job description is a very important issue, and one that should be raised through these focus groups, and can be raised independently as well.
Well, it's an important issue for the first select person as well, and so I would just raise to this commission that this commission has no authority really to make decisions about who's going to do what in terms of economic development. But it does have the authority of influence. And I would just offer to this commission and to our chair the idea that this is such an important issue. I believe the current Economic Development Commission should make a very strong statement as to what it believes should be the allocation of responsibility for economic development before the election in November and before that job description for the town manager is finally written, regardless of what the focus groups tend to turn up. Because I would think that it's unlikely that any participants in those focus groups will dwell on that subject except our participants.
I
think that's right. I mean, just because it's not typical to have a job description for a first selectman doesn't mean we shouldn't have one. I think it's pretty important to know what you expect people to do, especially, we haven't existed in this form of government for the last 200 years where everyone kind of knows their lane. We're making a switch, right? And if economic development is important, and I think growing our tax base is probably pretty important to the people of this community, we should probably know who's charged with doing it, because that will inform both who we elect as well as, who the best person for the town manager job is. If the town manager is expected to be riding herd on everything that goes on in this town, and that's about it, and only be kind of tangentially involved with economic development, that's one type of person. If that person is supposed to be leading the charge for getting new companies to locate in Simsbury, well, that's a completely different type of person who should be kind of responsible for that. So unless we know, kind of who's doing it, and we're really in a difficult spot of both choosing a town manager and electing a first selectman.
That's what these focus groups are about. is to get exactly that kind of comment and feedback, so that whatever job description is finally voted on by the Board of Selectmen is well informed. And if
Well,
you
and
guys
I
want to
agree.
take, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I agree, because if, the first selectman's position, although it's a voted position, it's also a paid position. So,
There is a stipend
There's a
that's right now
stipend
for
given-
$10,000 to cover the cost of
But you-
incidental travel, but that, there's no compensation, traditional compensation.
but you can't have two people trying to do the same thing. It's
No,
spinning your wheels.
This is kind of crazy, and when you think, and this is a completely new form of government. And I agree 100% with what Jay has just said, that with a completely new form of government for this town, we should take a very, very intentional approach to who is supposed to do what, especially in economic development. Now, how can we influence that? One way we could influence it is that this Economic Development Commission could become very aggressive.
Which is fine.
In terms of communicating with the community, communicating with the Board of Selectmen, communicating with who's ever finally going to write this job description, with appearances at Board of Selectmen meetings, with letters and so forth and so on. And I would highly recommend that we consider doing that when we talk about our agenda. The other thing about Main Street Partnership is that the Main Street Partnership is right now a far more powerful organization than this commission is in terms of economic development activity, because it's what it does. And I believe that the Main Street Partnership should have a policy point of view about job description as regards economic development. And I would urge the Main Street Partnership to take a position, one way or another, rather than just stand by and let things happen.
Has your board discussed
Without
these new
influence.
roles at all in the board meetings?
Yeah, I mean, we had somebody that sat on the charter revision, so we've been involved and updated from the beginning.
These are conundrums there are no answers to at this point because it's premature, but I'd like to go back to the organization that we've engaged that's going to do the search and find and make the presentation.
Before you do that, Dave, can I just, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I just want to address this. I think if this board wants to, if this commission wants to take a position on how the roles ought to be allocated and what specific competencies you would recommend in a town manager, then by all means do so. I think that would be welcomed, and I think that's literally the point of what these focus groups are designed to bring forth.
And I think it would be helpful if we had a better understanding of, well, here's the things the town manager must do.
That's all in the charter, Jay, and it's, I mean, in fact, if you take a look, the key responsibilities for the town manager are already in the charter, and that's as is the nature of the first select person's position. But you know, as I say, for however long we've had this form of government, we also haven't had a job description for the first select person other than what's in the charter. Currently, without any job description changes, the responsibility for economic development was moved by the Board of Selectmen to the first select person's office, that economic development efforts have been coordinated by the first select woman with staff and with Main Street and with members of the business community as well. So there's been an approach that's succeeded. Now, you guys make a very good point about being intentional about this, but I think if you wanted to take a meeting and spend some time on outlining where one responsibility starts and the next starts, that's certainly something that would add value, I think.
Just to underscore the seriousness of it, the reality is that we have two people on the ballot at the present time, going to be on the ballot for first selectman.
Three.
Both of them.
There's three.
Is that a three?
There's three.
There's three, excuse me. Two of the three that have.
Well, we have a petitioning candidate for that?
Two.
Mr. Kalishman.
Mr. Kalishman.
You have to say there's three.
There's two on the ballot then, right?
There are 3 on the ballot.
There will be 3 on the
I
ballot.
hear you, I hear you.
Okay, so 2 of the 3 that have been nominated by their, or put forward by their respective town committees have full-time employment. They are definitely going to be part-time first selectman, unlike our current first selectman, who works full-time and is paid a full-time salary. Might not be the right one, but it is a full-time salary. So it would be kind of crazy to expect that a part-time first selectman with a full-time job is going to take a lead, the same kind of lead role in economic development that our current first select person has been able to take. Equally, and unless a review of what's in the charter would say that this isn't true, I guess that what it says in the town charter about the town manager is silent on the subject of economic development. Correct?
I believe that's correct.
That is correct. That means that as we sit here right now, there is no expectation of either the new first selectman or the new town manager to play a major role in economic development. And if that's the case, that's not good.
Yeah, and honestly, and it's difficult to see how it happens, which is why, to put the broken record back on again, I felt that if we really want to attract businesses, high-growth businesses that are hiring high-salary people to work there, we need a person dedicated to doing that. Not an economic development coordinator. We need someone with a Rolodex and experience to do that sort of thing, because the town manager is not going to be able to really do it. They got our town to run. There's potholes that need to be fixed. I mean, there's lots of stuff that goes on in running town. I don't know exactly what it is. I know there's a lot. They're not going to be able to go out there and really do the job justice. A part-time first selectman who's essentially not getting paid is probably also not going to be able to have the time to really do the job justice. So we're kind of forced to pick between, okay, here are 2 suboptimal places where this role that's critical to getting the lifeblood of our economy working. All right, so which one of these poor decisions do you want to make in terms of where you put economic development? That's really what it seems like we're forced to have, and you know, I don't see there being a good decision here.
Do we know where economic development falls within West Hartford's structure, because they have a town manager and a part-time first selectman?
You've got to remember that, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Jay, but at the same time, I'd also say that, I'd offer up that currently there is the First Selectman's Office, which is tasked with economic development and has the resources, not just Main Street, but planning and, you know, all the different pieces. And hopefully, being positive, the goal is now you have 2 people, plus Main Street, plus planning, plus everyone, that would be focused on economic development. And
here's where my
If
concern is.
If it's not one person's job, it's nobody's job. If it's,
well, in West Hartford, what they do is, the first selectman is the face, the ambassador.
The mayor.
Okay? Sorry, the mayor.
Right.
The mayor is the face, the ambassador. The mayor goes out, the mayor will take a meeting, and then the mayor will initiate the conversation, and then the town manager, department heads, et cetera, will move in for more specific. So it is a coordinated effort, and that does seem to be the way that most of these forms of government go, that have a elected official and then a town manager.
is the mayor paid in West Hartford?
In West Hartford, the
No.
mayor is
This
not,
mayor
the
is
mayor
not
is
paid, and
volunteer.
the mayor is
It's
works,
a volunteer.
has worked lots and lots of hours, the prior mayor.
Yeah, he's
worked
probably
lots of
the
hours.
biggest volunteer in
Right,
town,
right.
but it's not a paid position.
What does Avon do?
Well, here's my concern. So I did we're not going to talk about it yet, but I did the presentation, okay? And I just want to I have serious concerns about the economic strategic plan of this town, because I think it continues to fall on deaf ears that we need to have a statement about what kind of cohesive statement that other boards and commissions have gotten together on and come up with what our mission statement is as a town with regard to economic development. Now, there's an economic development strategic plan, which is really a project list, okay, that we've seen here in our commission that there was no collaboration with the Economic Development Commission on, okay?
That's right, there used to be.
There used to be, and there wasn't, okay?
Well, that's a
And-
misnomer, that's a mistitle, it says Economic Development Strategic Plan, but we have already said in
Well-
this commission, it is not a plan.
No, but Tom, I just want to, let me finish. So when I presented
Excuse me.
at the, at the meeting, I was told that it was a strategic plan
is
by the
not.
Board of Selectmen, and it is not.
No.
Okay? And that is the basis of the problem, is that we don't have a plan on how to move forward. We don't have a 2-year, a 5-year, or 10-year plan on what kind of businesses we want to attract, how we're going to do it, and who's going to do it. Okay? And until that plan is in place, it's hard to put those job responsibilities on particular people because we don't know what we want.
But those people are gonna participate in the preparation
Right.
of that plan. That if it's gonna be the town manager, then the town manager has to be part of the task force to develop the plan.
Right,
If it's-
but Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not get a warm and fuzzy feeling, okay, at the Board of Selectmen meeting about any collaboration with the new Economic Development Commission on the development of a strategic economic development plan for this town.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I believe that,
Dave, you're talking.
Mr. Moore,
At the meeting.
I
because he was
was,
at the meeting with me.
right. I believe that under the new charter, it's going to essentially be the responsibility of the entire Board of Selectmen, not just the first selectman, that the first selectman is going to be a first among equals more than anything else. As such, there was not only some ruffling of feathers for the EDC having a say as to what the first select person's responsibilities are or are going to be. There's also going to be some pushback from the board as a whole, having a subsidiary organization tell it how it's going to do its job. And so we need to, I agree that our charge, our mission, is to make sure that the governing body, however it is constituted, is having as one of its focus, a primary focus, the economic development of this town. And we gave our recommendations. The board is not going to act on those recommendations because it's going to be the new board that actually makes those decisions. So these comments are essentially to help us figure out the most effective way to advocate for what it is that we see as a necessity for this town. And how forceful we are on this, I think, is going to be a matter of appearance more than anything else. If we appear to be overbearing, we will fall on deaf ears. If we appear to be passionate about what we're recommending, I believe that that passion will resonate with both the current and the future board, because there are a number of board members who are running for re-election. So we want to be careful about how we present what we see as a necessity for the growth of this town, for the sustained health of this town, yet be aware of the fact that the new board may not be quite so willing to be constrained by what it is that we're recommending. Just saying.
Well, I don't know if that Board of Selectmen actually read what Chris presented prior to that meeting.
Actually, Chris did a beautiful job of reviewing it, almost section by section at the meeting.
Wonderful.
And it was,
Because
It
the
was a shining moment.
two of the major points in that recommendation were what Chris just said, that we have to have a strategic plan. In fact, I think the language says the first priority of the NEDC is to develop a strategic plan. And it also, the other important point was to focus the responsibilities somewhere for economic development within the town. And so I again would say between now and election time, between now and the new board, I was even going to propose, Chris, that we discuss in our October-November meetings the idea of preparing a letter, an official sort of farewell letter from this commission.
November would be probably too late, because the election's already happening.
No. Just to finish, a letter that will be addressed and hopefully read at the first meeting of the new Economic Development Commission, or a letter that would be prepared and presented somehow at the first meeting of the new Board of Selectmen to make sure that this doesn't fall in the cracks.
Well, I think, I don't know how legally, so we're done as of December 1st, okay? So the first meeting of the new Board of Selectmen would be that first Monday after.
It's December 4th.
December 4th.
Yeah.
So we're not really a commission. So to read something, can you read a letter on behalf of an old commission that's
Absolutely.
defunct?
I think what you're talking about in this, there is, I think, good reason to do what Tom's recommending. Everybody on the Board of Selectmen acknowledged that a huge amount of work and research had gone into the preparation of the document that they received. But they, like you, are also in the position where their terms expire in a few months, and actually in a few weeks. And so it is, other than the fact that we have a recruitment process going on, and specifics, including specifics about who has a responsibility for economic development and what specifically the responsibilities are, that stuff that does have to be fleshed out, at least for the town manager in the course of the next few weeks. And so something that the document that you all worked on and that was presented by Chris is largely directed to the next Board of Selectmen, which will have to decide when it creates the Economic Development Commission by ordinance what it looks like, what the terms are, and they now have the benefit of your research to do that. But you're also well positioned, having done all that work, to I think make a strong statement about, and I think Dave's advice is very good in terms of tone, if you'll allow me to say that, to stress the importance of a very specific approach to economic development.
So I may make a suggestion, is that prior to our October meeting, that you send your thoughts about what is important to include in a letter to Mr. Cook, who can give them to me, and I can summarize everything and present a draft at our October meeting. So we're not spending our October meeting talking about how wordsmithing things, and we can facilitate that, and that way all of our thoughts are incorporated into a letter that maybe is accompanied by an attachment of our proposal that I can speak to at the first Board of Selectmen meeting in public audience and read as a former.
In December.
In December.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
No.
So is this for the new EDC's role, or where economic development should fall?
Well, our opinion about where economic development should fall and how that, and I think the implementation of a strategic plan to, summarize really what we're passionate about and what we're thinking, which is really what is driving what our recommendation was that in that document. So, not the details of we want 7 members, but really what is the overall goal and what we hope that they consider moving forward. And I think if I read it during public audience, as a former chair of this commission, prior to a new commission being put in place, that may be helpful at the December Selectmen's meeting.
Well, in terms of the town,
I'll get heckled by a few
I'd be
people,
happy
but-
to do that. I think that's a great idea, but as far as the job description is concerned, a couple of questions. What's the drop dead date for the finalization of that job description? Is it before we start
Yesterday.
interviewing anybody?
That has not been finalized, but definitely, I would expect that that will be done before interviews commence.
And Chris Kelly is,
Yeah.
correct, is coordinating the,
The personnel subcommittee has essentially been the steering, the selection committee's workforce. And so information sent to I will, I mean, if you guys send things to me, I'll make sure the full board gets them, but I'll also make sure that Chris and the recruiter get them as well.
Before I was interrupted, the
I'm
question
sorry.
I wanted to ask you was, what information can you give us on, they've hired this organization out of Vermont as of some point in time, right? And I think they agreed to pay him $25,000 or $35,000.
In the 20s.
Okay, that's not really important. What is the status of their progress so far that can be revealed? How much have they advertised? How many applicants do they have? Have they screened any applicants out? All those questions. I don't know if you can reveal that or not, but to me, all the stuff we're talking about goes back to that point to start. So I think it's important information.
The position has been advertised. There is a pool of candidates that has been narrowed. And
How many and how big is the pool?
I don't want to get into that detail right now, David, but I can tell you that there are a number of candidates who have been asked to answer essay questions, and that's the current status.
Tom, that is really problematic, because if there is no language in any of this, that these candidates are going to be evaluated on the basis of their ability to lead economic development efforts, then how can we possibly interview candidates for town manager before we know what they're supposed to be good at doing?
Economic development has been highlighted in the information that they've been asked to provide.
Well, to Tom's point, I mean, beyond economic development, so we're gonna have a focus group on September 25th about what would you like to see in your new town manager. In the meantime, we've already asked them to write essay questions. I don't know, like they're applying to school. I guess it works a little differently in this sector in terms of how one gets jobs. But we're asking them to write essays as to why I'd be a great town manager, and the community hasn't spoken yet on what would make a good town manager.
Did you respond to the survey, Jack?
We've talked about it a number of times. There was a survey sent out to both the public and to employees
I
of the boards and
responded to
commissions.
yeah.
And that included an opportunity to say how important economic development is, and in fact, it was stressed by a lot of people. So in fact, it has been covered in the process.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, all right. I thought the 25th was the.
No,
So what's the
no,
20
this
what's
has
the
been
thing on
going
the
on for a
25th
long
then?
time. The 25th is going to be an opportunity to lock in the information that we have and to make sure that we know. And guys, if I've said something to suggest that economic development has not been a priority in this process, I apologize. It has been. I think anybody involved in it understands that this is going to be one of the truly important things for this town moving forward. Now, whether that's been reduced right now to a job description for the first select woman, that's at a level of detail that we haven't finalized.
but I think the focus group, we have the opportunity, the consultant will be there.
Absolutely.
And so they're gonna hear, so we've filled out surveys, town people have filled out surveys. Is that an opportunity to verbalize to the consultant what
Yes.
our specific concerns are and needs and,
That's absolutely right. I mean, this is not a hollow gesture. This is we've just gone, the way this town works is very heavily reliant on feedback from boards and commissions. I mean, we just talked about the whole Deepwater Wind approach. We didn't send those requests out because we thought it was important to check a box. It's been incorporated into the First Selectwoman's testimony before the Siting Council. The information that we get from people is reviewed and incorporated and taken seriously, as the focus groups will fall right in that category. So I'd encourage involvement. I'd encourage, if you don't want to do a focus group, write a letter. Every letter received on Deepwater Wind from people was sent to the Board of Selectmen. This is an administration and a board that will listen.
Well, and if you want to get it into public record, other than in writing, attend a Board of Selectmen meeting and during public audience.
Well, Chris, better than that. We're having a public hearing on it
Right.
in the evening of the 25th. So,
Right.
and that's an opportunity to speak directly to the Board of Selectmen and to say, you know, if economic development isn't the top priority, or whatever it is you want to say, then there's a problem.
What's the time of the meeting?
Is it 6?
6
6 on the 25th.
Tom, I want to apologize for that little outburst about the search process. I frankly had forgotten about the survey, and I didn't see the summary of the survey, and I probably should have. And I didn't realize that when we went out to these potential candidates, we went out with them, as you have just confirmed, we went out with them with specifications that include a heavy dose of economic development expertise.
Thank you, Tom. No apology ever necessary, but that's the joy of these meetings.
And one other thing, I just want to get back to Main Street Partnership. This commission is going to take a strong position about town manager responsibility for economic development, I sense. I would urge the Main Street Partnership Board to strongly consider the possibility of deciding how it feels about responsibility for economic development and where it should be located. I think
I will make sure to convey that. We meet next Thursday. We meet a week after yours meeting,
Yeah.
so I will make sure to convey that
That'd be
to the
great.
board.
And if I could put a fine point on it, on what Tom was saying, the first Selectwoman's testimony has been shaped in large part by what the boards responded. And one of our board's concerns, as far as the environment is concerned, is in fact incorporated as one of the town positions. So what we said actually had an impact on what the town is doing as far as its presentation with the solar farm. The other thing, too, is that the focus group is going to essentially enable the consultant to fine-tune what is happening as far as the search is concerned and how the interviews will be taking place and what is discussed during the interviews. So I would urge us to diplomatically, but also forcefully, put our concerns out at the focus group and/or at the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 25th.
Would that be in this room?
Yes.
The focus group's not in this room.
No, focus groups will be at the library.
That's at the library.
But,
Board of Selectmen meeting will be here.
And I will happily receive
Feedback from you guys for an October meeting to prepare a letter. I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, so make sure a week prior to our October meeting that any of your thoughts that you want included in the letter, so it gives me a few days to try to draft digest and try to draft something that is collaborative would be appreciated. And send those to Tom, and then he can send them to me so we don't violate any FOIA.
That'll work.
The 9/25 meeting, I'm so sorry, is the September 25th meeting, that's a Board of Selectmen meeting to
Yes, there's a
discuss-
public hearing component.
Oh, and there's going to be a public hearing on the town manager.
That's correct.
And so anyone can get up and,
You got it.
Speak to that topic alone during the public
are you
hearing.
going to do it?
Because I have nothing better to do on Monday night. Yes, absolutely.
So am I.
Are we done with this portion? I just want to, we have several new businesses who are in town. Before we go to the next agenda item, I just want to acknowledge them. So we've got the Storyteller's Cottage, I think, is.
Yes, which is Lisa and Matthew Macharian, which own Fiddler's Green. You have the new art workshop opened by Katie in Simsbury Town Shops. We're doing a ribbon cutting for Hello Lovely, which is in the Maple Tree Plaza. You'll be receiving an invitation, but that's going to be on November 16th at 4:30. The Iron Horse Pub, which is behind Andy's, formerly Andy's Market, is open. That's a expansion of People's Choice. There's more.
Lovely little outdoor seating area, by the
Yeah,
way.
he's done a
Yeah.
very nice job,
Yeah.
Rob, if you haven't checked it out. We'll be doing ribbon cutting there. And then Charlie Kaler, who purchased five
Extra bennies.
Yeah, the old Union Accents, you know, is open, has moved to Remax.
Sir, could you explain,
No.
what is that new place that's trying to open up in Fiddler's Green?
That's the storytellers.
So it will be open. She received her sign permit yesterday. They are doing all sorts of activities. They're going to have events. They're going to have book events, special themed authors, and I mean, it's going to be an event space that's focused around books and adventures and things of that nature.
Do they sell anything there, or do they give things away? Or what do
No,
they
I
do?
don't believe, it's not retail, it's more recreational under the town code, so they're not gonna sell so much as, it's an experience.
So that's financed by the owners?
Yes,
They're
that
doing
it's owned, the Storytellers Cottage is owned, Bruce and Madeline used to have their home there when they sold the property. The old Victorian house has been reconverted from a house to now a space, an entertainment event space.
So I just wanted to acknowledge those businesses because I wanted to welcome them
Yeah,
to town. So,
And we'll keep you guys informed, as we mentioned, we did the groundbreaking for Silverman Group, and so anytime we have a ribbon cutting or something of that nature, you know, we...
So they now are officially recognized to be able to open up?
Yes, they've moved through
Yeah.
all the permitting, everything is...
When did that all happen?
The final pieces were put together at the last Board of Selectmen meeting. They signed the shared parking agreement, and then at the zoning commission meeting, the last zoning meeting, they approved everything, the site plan and all of the changes, so they're ready to go.
great, thank you. So we're gonna go on to item 4, which is the update on the NEDC presentation to the Board of Selectmen, which we've been speaking about. So we were there. I spoke, really outlined the highlights. Some of the feedback we got was, I think Chris Kelly started the conversation, was they really thought that a liaison from our commissions to other boards were going to be more effective in participating in project presentations regarding having a liaison from us go to planning or zoning or conservation, things like that, instead of trying to get what was the EDC task force recommendation, getting collaborative meetings for the presentations. So that came out of that meeting. We've talked about a couple of the other questions that came up during conversation. We did receive a letter from Lisa, I think it was sent to all of us, stating that they're going to pass these recommendations over to the new Board of Selectmen. And they thanked us for our hard work, and we acknowledged Tom for his being a taskmaster and getting us through this project. So I think it was well received. They appreciated the thoughtfulness, and I think quite frankly, they, and both Sean and Lisa, I think, said this, they were unsure what they were going to get from us, and I think we were unsure what we were going to deliver. And so they were very pleased with the final product and appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into it and the research behind it. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dave, because you were there.
They were individually unanimous in their gratitude towards the depth of the report and the effort that went into it, and were appreciative of not only achieving the bare bones expectations, but actually going well beyond what they thought we might come up with. So the appreciation was not just words, it was genuinely expressed by all 6 members. So we should be commended for the speed as well as the depth that we produced the final product. So, and
I don't know if you have, I don't know if the two of us missed anything as highlights from that, but I think that's what.
Wasn't asked for this, but on a personal note, you guys have positioned the next Board of Selectmen to make some really thoughtful decisions about how they move forward. And far from doing it in a vacuum, they've got some very, very specific things to think about. And so that was a huge achievement.
It was pretty wise of them to ask for it, you know? It really was. It was
It made sense to do.
a good idea to request that from this commission. Yeah, okay.
I'm going out on a high note.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the next item we've, on the agenda is really October and November. Those are our last two meetings. We've kind of already talked about what we're going to do at our October meeting in terms of finalizing this draft letter with recommendations for the new Board of Selectmen. And, you know, maybe we reserve our comments about November's agenda in October, whether or not we even need to have a meeting after that.
Right.
So give some thought to that.
Have a pizza party or something.
I'll bake for you all. I'll bring coffee and bake goods. I can do that for October.
Very well.
Does anybody have any questions, or do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
You do.
Okay, all in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Thank you
Right,
all.
have a great day. Thank you for your help. Twice in a row, 8:30.
Wow.
It is record.